He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Welcome back to Hobbies Ministry of Truth, and welcome to everyone that's here, and to include Cat Reed and number 2 who just walked in. So yesterday we started off. I almost closed the wrong fucking window. Not yesterday. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. We started off with this thing called residential schools in Canada, and we moved south of the border, and we found out they're called Native American boarding schools. So I told you all this stuff's going to come together, but how are you going to believe what the media is telling you over what the actual people are telling you, right? Because we know the media and the government would never lie. The government would never make these boarding schools and make them ready, available, where they can just kidnap kids and change who they were. Forget their past, forget their family, forget everything they are, and assimilate. So hopefully YouTube doesn't want to play censorship on some of these clips. Rumble won't, but let's get to the first video. Continuation from yesterday, guys.
Been a century in the making.
America had hidden the truth from America.
As an award-winning NBC News investigative team heads to the South Dakota Badlands in the Pine Ridge Reservation to hear their untold stories.
I don't want to repeat it.
Of children forcibly taken from their homes and abused.
I became a shallow breather, thinking that if I don't breathe loud, I might disappear.
And to uncover painful truths.
Enrich us in what we do.
Sidestep my question. To bear witness to an unspeakable chapter in America's history.
They are being rapidly brought from their state of savagery.
Not just America, but Canada.
To one of civilization.
It's hard to know what genocide is if this isn't it. How do we make sense of a policy of the U.S. government that forcibly separated an estimated 100,000 children from their parents, withheld food from those who protested, or threw them in jail, that took those often traumatized children, some as young as 4, to boarding schools where their language was forbidden and their beliefs rejected, where the death rate far exceeded those of white children, and where abuse, both physical and sexual, was commonplace? What to call such a system? Those who created it back in the mid-1800s called it the Federal Indian Boarding School System, but perhaps it should have been called an instrument of American genocide. About 100 miles from Mount Rushmore, a sovereign nation stretches out in South Dakota. Beyond the Rocky Badlands, the Pine Ridge Reservation, home to the Lakota and one of the poorest places in America. This cemetery, tucked behind the Red Cloud Indian School, is in many ways symbolic of a much wider reckoning, dating back 150 years. This was one of the Native American boarding schools, then called Holy Rosary Mission, sanctioned by the federal government and run by the Catholic Church.
Oh, even better.
The school's articulated mission: kill the Indian in him and save the man. And this is where Marcia Small enters the story, a Northern Cheyenne woman who we first met here 6 months ago.
I get really emotional in these places. The work we do is sacred. It will move us toward a horizon of healing. There's so much to be done. It's overwhelming at times. And if we don't all step to the plate, the nation itself, the United States of America, it will not heal.
Small is the only Native person in the U.S. leading the painstaking process of using ground-penetrating radar to help heal wounds of a painful past. By looking for the unmarked graves
Not
of
yet. I got to
lost
get elected
Indigenous
first. Sir.
children who may be buried at schools like this one. How might it have happened? Beginning in the early 1800s, the U.S. government set up over 400 boarding schools across 37 states,
They did.
some of which operated through 1969. About half of the schools were run by religious groups, many of which received federal payment per student.
Through the agencies of the government, they are being rapidly brought from their state of comparative.
Not only did they get kidnapped from their parents or their parents go to jail, but the school got paid to steal these kids the entire time they were in school. Interesting.
Savagery and barbarism to one of civilization.
These unpublished
Almost sounds like
outtakes
the
from the
modern-day prison
1929
system.
newsreel show just how clear the government was in its efforts to force Native children to give up their culture.
These children, but a few years ago, looked just like those we saw before. But today they all speak English, and some have taken business courses. We bring them in, clean them up, and start them on their way to civilization.
And the policy wasn't only designed to extinguish their beliefs, but to also make it easier for the government to take
That's pretty
their
much what they
land.
wanted to do.
In a 1969 Senate report, boarding school education was explicitly described as a weapon by which these goals were to be accomplished. What did it feel like to be trapped inside that system? We spoke to several former boarding school students, many of them telling their story for the first time publicly.
When I call me
Hey,
very
Ward.
sadistic because he took pleasure in spanking us.
89-year-old Basil Braveheart remembers being physically abused at Jesuit-run Red Cloud when he was a student, beginning in the late 1930s. The memory of being punished by a nun for speaking Lakota has stayed with him all these years.
She took out a rubber band. I want you to bite this rubber band with your teeth. And I want you.
It's funny you should say that because remember I say a lot, history is written by the victors and everything is propaganda. That was propaganda back in the 1920s. Well, that was propaganda back in the 1920s, which would make sense and why it seemed like that. And a lot of the a lot of these boarding schools, yes, they are run by churches, but other were run by the military. And that's another way they were using them to forget who they were. And making them into fighters.
Well, as far as you can, let it go. The pain on my lips, physical pain.
But worse than the pain of that moment,
my friends laughed at me. To have your peers laugh at you goes to the deepest part of who you are. It's shaming.
And very effective in getting you not to speak your language, I imagine. Braveheart was just 6 years old when he was sent away to school here. He says he now knows his family had no choice but to send him.
And if they didn't do it, Indian policemen will come and look for you, horseback, and they will find you. They told us that if you keep violating this, they mark you down and they weaponize rations.
Food?
Yes.
What?
You either send the kid or we'll track you down with the police,
Right.
We'll cut your food rations. So really, they
Sounds like the
didn't have a
government.
choice.
I didn't understand that.
Did you feel betrayed when they sent
I
you?
felt betrayed by my grandparents and my parents. But afterwards, they were following a policy to survive.
At school, he remembers his hair was immediately cut, which is only done in the Lakota tradition when a very close relative dies.
Very soon after we got to the school, I got a haircut.
Do you remember how that felt?
Pehing, which means hair, is very sacred. I remember my grandma said, when you cut your hair, we put that in a cloth and we give it to grandpa. And whenever there is a sacred fire, the smoke becomes spirit from the hair.
Oh, you know it's super chopped up. That's why I was trying to find some Al Jazeera interviews. But I can find stories on Al Jazeera, but I couldn't find interviews with these people. And two of these stories are from, obviously, mainstream media. The next one I got for you is from PBS Utah. Another one's a local station from Indiana.
That transcends.
We're going to be here a while,
and becomes one
so y'all know.
with the uncreated. divinity.
Well, I take it that the Jesuits were not saving your hair so that it could be used in a ceremony.
No, it fell on the floor and they were walking on it. That to me was a deep spiritual violation and disrespect.
As we spoke, Braveheart revealed a hidden trauma that he's lived with since he was a child.
When I was in the dormitory when I was 8, 9 years old, and every night after the lights goes out, when a person walks in it, you can hear the squeaking. That squeaking, it still is a trigger for me.
One of the authorities at the school would come into the boys' dorm at night. For what purpose?
Looking for little boys.
To have sex with, presumably.
That's it. I became a shallow breather, thinking that if I don't breathe loud, I might disappear.
He was not alone. Just this year, a government report concluded that physical and sexual abuse was rampant at the schools. Braveheart's classmate Robert Strikes Lightning was sent to Red Cloud in 1943. He says he was 13 when a priest hit him with a sash lined with metal pellets.
Oh. He was big and strong then. He said, you won't be able to sit for a week. He was right. I had blisters on my backside.
And that wasn't the only time.
We'd go in his office and he would say, you know why you're here? Now grab your ankles. We'd bend over and grab our ankles. He had a big black strap back there and he'd take that off. Grab your ankles and he'll hit you till he sweated.
About a decade later, Cecilia Firethunder, now 76, attended Red Cloud with her 3 sisters.
My dad and my mom made a decision to put us here for economic reasons. In the 50s and 60s, there was no economy, there was no jobs. And so they had children to feed.
I was thinking that too, but I also think, what's it, Strikes Lightning, Strikes Thunder, whatever that kid's name? Like Odin.
And then that's the big girls' dormitory.
We talked in the shadow of what had been the girls' dormitory when she was there. She told us she was never beaten, but was punished by the nuns for speaking Lakota.
That was the rule on the little girl side. You cannot speak Lakota.
Do you speak the language still?
Yes.
I never forgot my language.
Firethunder remembers the way her grandmother encouraged her to hold on to her Lakota identity.
You had to live a double life here. You had to behave by all the rules, but keep your own self in there.
We knew we had no power. The nuns were power. You can't fight it. So what do? Just get by. Just get by.
Firethunder worked as a nurse before rising to become the first female president of the Ogallala Sioux tribe in 2004. Looking back, she says, growing up, separated from her mother, meant that she struggled to nurture her own children.
Well, do you feel you were a bad mother?
Of course I did. Of course I felt I was a bad mother because then I screamed and yelled and punished my kids. And then
that's what you knew.
Trauma.
That's what they showed us.
Alex Whiteplume is also a former president of the tribe, although he attended 2 boarding schools elsewhere.
The beatings were usually they grab you by the ear and they jerk you down to the principal's office, or they grab you by the arm so hard that they leave fingerprints on your arms. And we were little guys, and that pain would last for days. And you got to a point where you didn't want to tell your dad or mom because they couldn't do nothing. It's just waste. So we just had to go along with it, and it was accepted.
Did you ever get hit with a strap or
No.
that sort of stuff?
No, the beatings, that was my mom and dad's generation that were beat. It was a little bit lenient when I grew up.
Have they told you about what happened to them?
Yeah. I don't want to repeat it.
The trauma manifested now in other ways, says Braveheart.
Students I went with, especially the boys, all of them drink. He drank as a medicine to tame their feelings.
And it continues today.
What this facility did and other facilities did to our people, it still affects us to this day through poverty, suicide, addiction, many other things.
Eleanor Ferguson told us she's trying to understand her own hurt.
I had to go deep within and realize that it was the church who, installed these traumas within my bloodline. It
You don't
wasn't my
say.
family's fault. You know, so I had to stop blaming them for my hurt and my pain and my suffering.
For the first time in history, both the Secretary of the Interior and the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs are Native Americans themselves. And yet, nearly 2 years into the administration, the Interior Department is still tallying up how many schools were involved and how many children died. Meanwhile, Canada, which modeled its boarding school system on the U.S., has already paid billions in reparations. And thanks to Indigenous leaders there, the Pope even traveled to Canada to apologize for the church's role in what he calls genocide. These
so
are the
fucking
voices
cool. I
of
would
some
love
of
to go
those
walk
who
around there.
attended such schools.
America has hidden the truth from America.
They had physical abuse, mental abuse, you name it.
Right? They would totally
I
get
became a shallow
taken
breather,
care of. Oh, wow.
thinking that if I
Those are
don't
columns.
breathe loud, I might disappear.
While we were at Red Cloud last spring, Brian Newland, the Assistant Secretary of the Interior
Oh,
for Indian Affairs,
I didn't even notice.
himself a Native American, showed up unexpectedly. How do you personally feel about this effort to locate possibility of children's bodies using this machinery?
Well, it's deeply personal. There hasn't been one single Indian person in this country who's not living with the impacts of and the legacy of these boarding schools where people didn't make it home from these schools. The number of kids who were taken against their will and against their families' wills to be placed into these schools is countless.
But there is a number. One expert says at least 100,000 children were legally removed from their families by the federal government.
Probably 10
and
times that.
40,000
Well,
died.
not really 10 times.
That death rate significantly higher than that of white children at the same time. And while Newland authored the Interior Department report last year, which concluded there were 408 federal boarding schools, much is still left unresolved. For example, the report never uses the word genocide.
Why would it? Genocide hard to say?
You have to tell the story first and acknowledge first before then you can begin to move on, reconcile, and build back what was torn down.
But that is not a satisfactory answer to many of those we talked to. Alex Whitebloom, the former president of the tribe, confronted the assistant secretary.
We're not going to heal until we see some type of justice by the United States.
There were a lot of pleasantries until you stood up.
Yeah. Well, I had to correct the history. What we're sitting on here is a Roman Catholic Church land stolen in our treaty territory. And then the Assistant Secretary of Interior saying, we're going to bring you money. We're going to increase your law enforcement. We're going to bring your language back. That just ticked me off something awful. And so he's not telling the truth. He should face up to the truth.
Covering it up.
America should face up to the truth. The American genocide should be a topic that everybody discusses daily.
You heard a former president of this tribe say, we want to hear the word genocide.
The purpose of these schools was forcible assimilation to separate Indian people from their lands.
It's hard to know what genocide is if this isn't.
What's up, DJ Fruit Loop?
Again, we have to tell the whole story. And in tribal communities, families and people know exactly what happened to them. But what we need to do on behalf of the federal government is to paint the picture and acknowledge our own role. And we're at step one.
But why only step one? When the
fucking
Canadians
Trudeau.
who modeled their boarding school system on the U.S. have already called it cultural genocide and agreed to pay out billions in reparations.
But as of like 2 weeks ago, suddenly Canada's like, we don't have mass graves. We don't know where all these kids just fucking up and disappeared. It's okay though. It's okay though, because we gave them money.
Francis even traveled to Canada this past summer on a penance tour to apologize for the church's role in the abuse.
For the deplorable behavior of those members of the Catholic Church, I ask forgiveness from God. And I'd like to tell you from the bottom of my heart that I am very pained.
Meanwhile, the U.S. government is still investigating. And Red Cloud is conducting its own investigation.
I think the boarding schools play an outsized role in
intergenerational traumas that plague our Native communities. That's going to take a long time to undo some of that damage.
McCall Black Elk is leading an effort at Red Cloud, still a Jesuit school, with the difficult task they're calling truth and healing.
We're the first former Catholic Indian boarding school to be engaged in this effort, in this way and to be this far along. And hopefully we can show people that it's possible.
Marcia Small's work is part of this process, which the Jesuits at Red Cloud are helping to pay for.
Somebody does.
Keep your mic here.
On a recent
helps.
cold October morning at Red Cloud, Marcia Small continued her part in helping reveal what happened here.
My heart physically hurt. I feel empowered, but for some reason I feel incredibly sad. It's so sad right now.
Down these narrow basement steps, Small led the first public excavation of a former Native American boarding school, where an eyewitness said he
I
saw
wanna go there.
unmarked graves decades ago.
Y'all want some help?
FBI presence,
Oh,
Small's
fuck
team
that.
shoveled away layers of earth and sifted through sand, looking for what could be remains of indigenous children.
Let me come out
My
there.
ancestors put me here, and that's why I do this. We had to start somewhere, and we're here.
While she's not yet found any children's
So you
remains
picked a
here,
basement?
she believes there will be many unmarked graves in the cemetery, where she intends to return in the spring.
All I do is work for the ancestors. I work for the stolen, kidnapped children. If I can do that, if I can bring recognition, then I will.
Some of the next generation here believe the whole process is moving much too slowly.
What I see as change is we want our babies back. It wasn't right for the school to take our children and to assimilate us. We want to hold this school accountable.
We sat down with Philip Ironshell. His partner is Eleanor Ferguson. They're part of an indigenous youth group that protested on horseback while Newland was on campus.
No, I don't, Frogger. I wish they would. But I have a strange feeling that all these grave sites are just there for a reason. For people to be like, oh my God, this is what's wrong, and we're going to search here. I think something worse happened to these kids. Well, nothing can really be worse than death. But a life of pain and servitude that they did not want.
Campus.
When we ride these horses, it's also
So they're
very
not going to be
empowering
around
to us
schools.
as Lakota people.
Or
They're
these
really
schools.
sacred to us.
Would you like to see the Jesuits leave here?
Yes.
This is the census number.
Yeah.
Black Elk knows all too well how many divisions there are, even within the community.
Dude, I wonder who's got the lucky name of Blackcock.
His mother is a Lakota activist and his father was a former Catholic monk. There are still about 1,000 Catholics in the community of approximately 20,000.
There are some people who don't like the Jesuits being involved in all of this. The perpetrators, in some larger sense, are involved in the process.
The Jesuits and the Catholic Church have their own healing to do. They have to face this history.
He sounds light in the
and
loafers.
Their role in it as perpetrators. There is healing too for the perpetrator.
But critics say this amounts to the church investigating itself. Father Peter Klink has been at Red Cloud for more than 40 years.
There are many in this community who feel the Jesuits are the bad guy, that the Jesuits should go.
At least from what I've tried to do ever since I came in 1975, was to do that lifting of the horizon of hope.
I think you just
do.
accept my question.
Well, I feel badly if people feel that way. I would love to see us be able to enter into a dialogue, either to end up together concluding the Jesuits should go, or to find the ways in which we can, in fact, join hands.
Disappear.
Father Klink arrived 6 years after the federal boarding school system ended and says he never witnessed any abuse. But he feels strongly
all
that the
Catholic priests say
community
that.
needs to face its past, even if that means digging in the cemetery or elsewhere on campus.
If we don't dig, if we don't find, then in fact, I don't know how we deal honestly with the past. Otherwise, we can't grow into the future that we hope we can grow into.
As brokenhearted as you would be by that.
I would be crushed to find out that we've got a lot of kids buried around here. But
Look at
yet
his face when he
I
said
don't think
that.
there's any way we can be a part of this.
He wouldn't be
process
crushed at
and
all.
Not pursue the truth.
Would you agree that the original purpose of schools like this was to kill the Indian and save the man. Would you consider it ethnic genocide?
Yeah, yes, because it was basically saying to them, you need to change. You're primitives. You know, that cultural genocide was the result of what we participated in. That's why the truth and healing process, which we began here prior to the Black Lives Matter movement, prior to the announcements in Canada, we had already decided that we were going to go through this because we need to deal honestly with that past before we can move to a vibrant future.
Red Cloud has made many changes. The Lakota language is now taught and celebrated in a first-of-its-kind program. The native language that the U.S. government once tried so hard to extinguish now reverberates around these classrooms.
Our people fought for us to speak this language, and they didn't want us to not speak this language, so we started speaking it so we could keep it, and we didn't make them fight for no reason.
Like all of those we met here, the legacy of the past is still very much alive for Basil Braveheart, a Korean War veteran.
There you go. Airborne!
Spent decades fighting to hold on to his Lakota identity.
I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I had a drinking problem. Someone told me, I said, you know, with your experience, you're kind of like a wounded healer. I think that's what I do, is to help
Hell
people
yeah.
to become whole, to become free of trauma.
He asked us not to film him as he honored our team with a Lakota healing ceremony. The first time he tells us he's conducted one for non-native people.
I'm just so curious about how you feel about America after everything you know, everything that has happened. I mean, you have an American flag over here, for example.
A combat veteran and Marine gave that flag to me. So I do.
I was going to say you're Army.
You don't say love, you say care for. Is that the
I
same?
love.
You love it?
Yeah.
Do you also consider yourself an American?
I'm not an American, I'm a Lakota. I don't know what being an American means. This is my land, this is my homeland. However, I come from a family of veterans. World War II, Vietnam, Korea. You honor it because all your relatives went and fought.
Do you consider yourself an American?
Wait a second.
I'm Lakota first. I served in the U.S. Army.
So they trained these kids. They took them. They assimilated them. And guess what? They made soldiers for the U.S. to go fight overseas. They didn't groom them. They assimilated them. Assimilating so much better than grooming, right?
Army first, I'm Oyuchbe Lakota Oglala. That's who I am. And then American can be fifth on that ladder.
White Plume wants the U.S. government to acknowledge what he says was stolen.
I will not accept a cheap apology. We want our treaty territories back. We just sit there and watch our people die in pain so they can take the land. It's a horrible story. America never owned up to the genocide. And this should be a general topic of discussion. We should deal with it.
Braveheart sees things differently and says his grandmother's wisdom continues to guide him.
And she's the one that told me that don't ever carry hate or prejudice because it's poison.
I mean, it's such a beautiful way to live. And yet it doesn't erase the trauma, does it? It doesn't erase the wrong, does it?
She said, you're going to remember Wounded Knee. You're going to remember what happened to you in boarding school.
But does that mean that the people who did the bad things, the wrong things, don't have to be held accountable?
She said the accountability is for us to let the divine take care of that. You probably.
I mean, if the government's not going to hold them accountable, we know Jesus forgave them for their sins. So who essentially is going to be held accountable? No one! Because that's how this works. We eradicate and we get you guys drunk and high on the stuff that, you know, that you got to help clear your mind from the shit we did to you. And there we go. There's the fucking disease blankets I was looking for. You smallpox giving motherfuckers.
Rodney will never forget what happened to you. They won't either. Mark my word. Here it is.
You're making me speechless, which is not a usual situation for me.
Sounds like you're about to cry. Oh, you're going to make out now?
The wisdom that she taught me.
Dude, she's in love with you. Look at her eyes. She's giving you that look.
To forgive the unforgivable.
Both men do agree on this. Much of the poverty and addiction, pain and struggle found here at Pine Ridge is a direct result of what many of the elders and those who came before them suffered under the boarding school system. Generational trauma is real. Healing will be complicated.
That's crazy because in Korea there's a camp called Camp Red Cloud. Never really wondered what it was about. I just knew it was some Indian that we were, I guess. Do they? Damn right she wants that native in her. So on to part 2. This actually came out. This is interesting. This is from this year, back in March. It's PBS Utah, and they're talking about the dark chapter of American history. And I know it's PBS, but I like hearing different perspectives and different interpretations from different tribes and different media, because, you know, one media is going to be completely different from the other media, which is going to be completely different from the other media, which is why I like my media, because I make what I want to hear. Just kidding. I find stuff and I think. Thinking hurts sometimes, but that's why I have weed. Okay? So with that being said, let's get to the second part of the 3-part yeah.
The Native American boarding school era is a dark chapter of American history.
The weed kicked in, guys. It's some good shit, too.
Policy was known as assimilation.
Fucking double doinks.
Everything native was to be stripped away. The thought was to kill the Indian and save the man. Their language was to be unspoken.
What's up with that hair? Oh, fuck. I had that haircut as a kid. All those kids stolen, man.
This program is made possible in part by the Lawrence T.D. Janet T.D. Foundation.
I'm going to be that guy. So, this shit happened within this century. Oh, shit, wrong century. You know what I meant. The 19th century. And the Native Americans seem to have forgotten, not really forgotten, but moved on. They just want answers. Interesting. They're not asking for reparations. They're asking for answers and for people to be held accountable. And that happened within the 19th century. Wait, 20th century. I forgot it's the other way around. But the 19th century, they're still complaining. Those people, that specific time frame is still complaining. And by people. There's still living relatives, living
If the Great Spirit
citizens.
had desired me to be a white man, he would have made me so in the first place. Sitting Bull. Stories are told of native children doing everything they could to escape boarding schools.
No. The only way they're going to get their answers if people request it. People push for it. We can have the Native American community push for this all they want, but they're a really small minority of this country. And people overlook that because everything else has been thrown in their way. They're going to cover shit like this up, but then they're going to overblow shit in the media that have nothing to do with this that will make you forget about this. And they know this. That's why the media and the government does what they want when it comes to supposed free speech.
Home was far away. They longed for anything familiar. Many were unsure as to what had happened to
The only
them.
reason I say the people envy rap is because when I did this show yesterday, I think Frogger could tell you. Was it Frogger or Zippity? They had no idea this was going on, whether in the U.S. or Canada, until yesterday.
They came from another world. Children took pride in their long hair. It was a symbol of strength and dignity.
Y'all
Their
thought I was
hair
kidding.
was cut to Anglo standards. Native clothes changed to military-style uniforms.
That's good. Train conductors?
They were forbidden to practice their way of life in the early boarding school years. Previously, relationships had been based upon the natural world and each other. Prayer and ceremony were important aspects of life.
There's Zippity. Okay, maybe it was Frogger then.
The early schools were run with military precision.
There's that military again.
It was more accurately should be called ethnic cleansing rather than assimilation. And it has had devastating effects on my people.
All right. Remind me, it's no longer assimilation. It's genocide cleansing, right? I'm going to get canceled for that, aren't I?
I think that was a time
Hello.
when the government really felt like they could, that was their last option, you know, with the so-called Indian problem that they had to deal with, and it was the last option to go for the children.
It's uncanny how some of these women look like my relatives.
Reservation shows families camped near
And I'm
a
not
boarding
Native American.
school in South Dakota. Close family proximity was discouraged.
Assimilation affected the Utes in a very tragic way. It was so ineffective that it did
I remember
not
that tribe name.
train us to become competent in the white world, and it took us away from our own culture.
Well, fuck. You guys can see yesterday they never once said white world, white man. Fuck, and then they fucked it up today.
So much so that we weren't even competent as Indians anymore.
It's beautiful. There's caves in there.
It's a summer day on Utah's San Juan River.
Yeah, I kind of wonder that myself. Because white could be anything. It could be you're British, Spain. Well, even Spain. Some white people in Spain. Portuguese. Just because its name's Portuguese, that they're still white. They were actually the first slave traders. Okay. You got the Norwegians, which makes me white, I guess, so to speak. And Polacks. Yep, Polacks and mix. You motherfuckers are just like me. Not often you hear those names anymore, like Spooks and Spades.
Cliffs and alcoves along the river offer glimpses of past civilizations. Beginning thousands of years ago, ancestral Puebloans were some of the first inhabitants of this area. The dwellings of River House provided sweeping vistas for ancient people who lived here. Petroglyphs etched into stone tell stories of ancient times. Ancestral Pueblo families lived here, seeking survival.
Oh my god, what's up with you today? It's all about the zipper heads and dragon ladies, right? It's okay, I can say that.
European explorers arrived in the Americas. They entered a world inhabited by indigenous people.
They even have painted horses.
Encountering the expedition led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark was a pivotal event in the history of Native Americans. Lewis and Clark explored the vast lands acquired by the United States from France in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803.
For Native Americans, I think it was the beginning of a very significant shift in their ways of life, in all areas of their life, from governance to the cultural.
Lewis and Clark eventually arrived at the Pacific. It was a significant moment in the history of the American West. The Lewis and Clark expedition publicized the West. Settlers and entrepreneurs would follow.
Liberals, too.
Change arrived, from the stark, remote Badlands to the unforgiving deserts of the American West. The United States government saw westward expansion as progress. Native Americans felt encroachment.
Native peoples have experienced many trails of tears, which were movements, violent movements to remove indigenous people from their homelands because white settlers desired their lands.
The Navajo were marched to a barren reservation called Bosque Redondo on the present-day Texas-New Mexico border. Nearly 2,000 Navajo died at Bosque Redondo. The Navajo were allowed to return home.
Allowed.
The 1868 treaty with the Navajo included the provision that their children must attend school. Native American boarding
We'll
schools.
give you your land back. We'll be nicer to you, but give us your fucking kids so we can teach them how to be productive members of society. And by that, we mean forget who they are.
Schools had been started much earlier by Christian missionaries.
And that makes me wonder. I think we talked about this yesterday, Zippy. I don't know if you brought it up. These missionaries, they go all around the world spreading the gospel. So this could still be going on. All around the world, especially in Africa.
The 1887 Dawes Act reinforced the reservation system and encouraged assimilation.
With us, there was immediate declaration of war on our culture. We were forbidden to speak our language and practice our religion, and it's like our war was prolonged, and the assimilation policies were how they implemented it, how they carried it out, and it was very destructive. And it caused historic trauma among most of our people, including myself to this day.
And I remember at the church being told that what my parents practiced would set them to hell, where they would burn forever. And when you're 7 years old and you hear that, that was really the most devastating, terrifying experience for me.
But some of the isolation or separation from parents was very difficult. But that was part of the agenda. If we're going to, as they say in the past, separate you from the blanket, we need to have full control of everything you do, everything you learn.
The Carlisle Indian Boarding School in Pennsylvania was founded in 1879. Carlisle had been a former military site.
The Native children who were sent to Carlisle, I think they, for the most part, arrived on the train. And so they probably
The train. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know I have this thing, I've talked about this, called the orphan trains. And I kind of feel like I was half right. So apparently it looks like they took not only Native Americans, but orphaned Irish, orphaned black kids, and retraining them and reassimilating in the way they want. And by they, we know it's the government.
endured hundreds of miles and long hours on the train before they arrived at their final destination, which was Carlisle.
Richard Henry Pratt was superintendent of Pennsylvania's Carlisle Indian School,
which is now Military War College.
Pratt previously experimented with Native American education, practicing on captives in Florida. Pratt felt they could be assimilated into society if given vocational and religious training. Richard Henry Pratt wrote in 1892, "A great general has said that the only good Indian is a dead one. In a sense, I agree with the sentiment, but only in this, that all the Indian there is in the race should be dead. Kill the Indian in him and save the man."
But you kill the Indian, you kill the man, because that's who that Indian was.
Three of the most famous boarding schools were Carlisle in Pennsylvania, Haskell in Lawrence, Kansas, and Sherman in Riverside, California. Haskell is now the Haskell Indian Nations University.
Yes,
It
ma'am.
was founded in 1884 as the United States Indian Industrial Training School. It opened its doors for 22 students. Boys studied farming and labor trades. Girls studied homemaking and sewing.
That doesn't look like 22.
The last high school class graduated in 1965.
65.
Lorena Charles went to Haskell in Kansas. It was far away from the Hopi mesas she called home.
Sometimes a teacher would get a ruler and, get
Lola.
on her hand or on your leg. And then they would tell the principal, and we'd get an extra, another detail to do, like washing the dishes or washing the dish towels.
Sherman started out as the Paris Indian School in 1892 in Paris, California. It was moved to Riverside in 1901. It's now the Sherman Indian High School.
It's strange that they would still utilize those buildings instead of tearing them
My
down.
mother was taken away when she was 9 years old and was not allowed to return until she was 18.
Both Carlisle in Pennsylvania and Haskell in Kansas had confinement rooms for unruly students.
I bet you those are haunted.
At one point, I really began to understand the trauma that had happened there when I had seen a picture of a jail that was at Haskell, and it was just a very small little cube cell jail, and I still have the picture of it.
These small handcuffs were recently discovered at Haskell. If truly authenticated, they appear
100%
to
will
fit a
agree with that.
small child.
Well, I've learned that the worst thing was the sexual abuse and then the emotional abuse that accompanied it in many of the schools. A lot of the schools were staffed by people who were many times isolated from society themselves.
Huh?
Navajo leader Manuelito agreed to uphold the 1868 treaty requiring American education for Navajo children. He sent his sons to Carlisle.
Within a year of arriving at Carlisle, Manuelito's son contracted a disease and died at Carlisle. And so Manuelito, upon learning of his son's death, immediately ordered that the children, the surviving children, be returned home. His second son came home. He was ill when he returned home and died within a matter of weeks after returning home.
There were 25 federally funded non-reservation Native American schools by 1902, with some 6,000 students. Estimates increased that population to 60,000 by 1973. Boarding schools brought Native children from many diverse cultures together in one place.
In many ways, it did the reverse. It strengthened our culture, and our
One common
relationship
cause.
with other tribes strengthened our culture. And so it created a intertribal pan-Indian relationship across our country.
Commissioner of Indian Affairs John Collier wrote in 1923, The administration of Indian affairs is a disgrace, a policy designed to rob Indians of their property, destroy their culture, and eventually exterminate them. The Merriam Report in 1928 documented abuses and made recommendations to correct them.
You know, there were a lot of people out in the larger the United States that kind of rallied on behalf of Native Americans. They saw what was going on.
A man Black Horse attended Haskell in a later era than the early boarding school days.
And so today, what remains are some unmarked graves near Haskell. And a lot of people still talk about the ghosts or the spirits that still roam around there. And a lot of students that go to school there will
Just an infant. Jesus. 85 to 1911. 80 or 97 to 08. These are kids. Kids. Oh, we're doing that now?
will have stories of hearing things, seeing things. And so I think that the healing process there is still happening.
It's amazing that we still exist as Native American people. That was not the intent. You know, the intent was to destroy us as Native people.
Boarding school was never forgotten by Native American children.
They all looked at me when they were giving me my haircut. That my long hair, you know, that clipper going through that and my long hair falling off. And I was really hurt. That was the teaching from my grandfather was, you know, your hair, your long hair is your strength, and your long hair is your wisdom, your knowledge.
It was, I mean, almost violent in a way that he and that's not only for him, it's for my other family members that have gone through the boarding school experience.
When I was at the boarding school, they chopped off my long hair, and I remember crying and crying and crying, and my mother was so upset.
Dee Satala went to Keams Canyon Boarding School on Arizona's Hopi Reservation.
Just remembering how hard they punished us or disciplined us, it's just that I didn't want to go through it. That's why I just always, you know, ran away from there.
There was a whip, there was spanking, and there was a punishment where you stand on your knees, and then there was a place where if you got caught doing things, they put a dictionary on your hand, and you get your hand out like that, and you stand out there, you know. And that was some of the punishment that you did. And I think the worst punishment that I experienced through was, you know, standing on my knee in one place, and I blacked out.
She did not pass that down to me. She was told not to teach me Ute because it would interfere in my mastery of English, and which we found is not true at all. And so that has caused harm to me. It's affected me emotionally, physically, culturally. It's been very disruptive in my life.
Navajo Kathleen Wood returns to the Chuska Boarding School in Tohatchee, New Mexico.
This was dormitory 3. It used to be right here. It's no longer here, but it used to be the big girls' dorm. There was another dorm to my left, and that was the little girls' dorm.
But at school, if you made a mistake, you know, sometimes it's harsh punishment. You just have to learn quickly. Up to this day, I still get sad about it. My mom my dad. I don't know what happened, but sometimes they didn't pick me up. And I still get emotional on this because I would be at the dorms with
What the
maybe
fuck are you
4 or
trying to
5
spell?
students. Christmas was the hardest, 1, 2 years, a couple of years maybe. She left me there and looking out the window, no one coming to pick you up. So that was hard. And it was sad for me because it's like, who's coming to get me? There were 3 boys that ran away from this school. They wanted to go home. Apparently, they got so lonely they wanted to visit family. There's 3 brothers, and they were from Nosh Chitty. They ran away from here as winter, January.
Oh.
I remember helicopters going around, flying over this plateau. We were told to stay inside the building. They did find the boys after a while.
Oh, that's my text message.
But the sad part is all 3 boys lost their legs due to frostbite, frozen legs. So they did come back to school.
What does that go
here,
for your
but they
spelling,
were
though, there, Tommy
wheelchairs,
boy?
And then later on, they went to
Yeah, it's my text tone.
the fake legs. But they were, they still finished here with us. And I still remember who they are, and they're not forgotten. May they rest in peace now. They're no longer around. But, sometimes when you get so lonely, you
Oh, okay. You're talking
do
about
desperate
collar.
things to
Gotcha,
go home.
gotcha. Right.
When I was in 2nd grade, that was my worst nightmare. I know I was traumatized from that. But going to Sherman, being with students that I know from the same village, from the same area, and meeting new students, to me, that was the greatest time of my life.
The clock no longer ticks at the Phoenix Indian School in Arizona. The history of the school dates from 1891.
Let me investigate that place. Fuck yeah. Give me the keys.
Palaka of the Hopi tribe attended the school.
There's nothing but good I didn't say about boarding schools. My dad just told us that's what we needed to survive today, and he was right about that. And I was glad I listened. There's many different tribes there, and made friends with pretty much every tribe. I had a friend in every tribe.
It closed in 1990.
I always thought I was going to get beat or get hit with a board or something, but that never happened to me, luckily. So I've witnessed the whole classroom witness one of our classmates get so badly beaten by the teacher. And so we were just like, that was awful and terrible.
Demoralizing.
But we just sort of went back and continued our class. I don't know what happened. We didn't know anything about reporting or anything like that. So
Davina Spotted Elk attended Tuba City Boarding School in Arizona as a young girl.
Right.
I would say my worst experience was when, after Tuba City boarding school, I had gone on to Seventh-day Adventist boarding school in Holbrook, Arizona. A lot of girls that were away from home. I would hear them sometimes cry in their bed. I probably only lasted half the year because I had cried so hard. There was a group of girls, little young girls, that ran away. We didn't know how far away home was, so we thought maybe it wasn't very far. But they said no, they caught us, and we went to the main principal. I don't know if he was a principal or the director of the boarding school, but they said that he had whipped each and every one of them. It was like a cord. It was like a electrical cord, I think they described it as. and they showed us the whipping marks, and some of them were very deep. And that was very scary for us. I think they wanted us to see that, so it would show, if anyone ever leaves again, this is what's going to happen. So we were terrified, and from that, for me, it was very traumatic.
And we didn't know a word of English. And they tried to tell us something, but we didn't understand. And then they kept telling us, and sometimes they would lose their patience and start talking hard and yelling, and then we start crying. So it was a terrifying experience.
Cheryl Marzak visits Navajo Carl Begay. Carl is a sheep herder who
What's
lives
his
near
last name?
Chinle, Arizona. Carl remembers the Intermountain Indian School which he attended in Brigham City, Utah.
Not Navajo, that's English. Always speak English.
How's his family get that name?
You know.
And he
Always
owns
say
sheep.
that,
Oh my God. I can't write this stuff
when
anymore.
we're out there in the sticks somewhere, we always sing or we always tell jokes, Navajo jokes and all that.
Today, the Intermountain Indian School is only a skeleton of its past. Intermountain opened in 1950 and closed in 1984. It was converted from a World War II military hospital.
The Intermountain Indian School in Brigham City, Utah, I'm happy to say was one of the best schools because it served the Intermountain West. We got kids from all over the western states.
Many Navajo were bused to Intermountain from their homes in Arizona and southern Utah. Darlene Smith met her husband Roy at Intermountain.
They had their own theater. They had their own dance halls, I mean, it was just the best time for me. That's where I met my husband. As he wasn't going to school there. He had graduated from there. He was in college at Utah State University. But I loved it. I loved the Indian school. Now I don't know how long they had it open after that, and they closed it down.
Boarding schools faced issues of overcrowding and funding shortfalls. Many parents wanted their children educated closer to home.
All of a sudden, the budgets were shut down, and we were really upset about that because it's like we finally got a hold on the federal schools to serve our kids, and then they shut them down. They pulled the rug out from under us.
I think kids were a lot stronger back then. So today's kids, if this had happened, they would need that to help.
For some, the boarding school experience was an opportunity for education.
The teachers were good. For them to come out and onto the reservation and teach us, I thought that was, pretty, how would you say, it's pretty courageous for them. Once in a while, they would say something negative. At the time, I thought that was okay to do. But now I don't think it's okay. It was okay, But we would just forget.
Davina Spotted Elk and Amanda Blackhorse visit the home of Davina's grandmother in Big Mountain, Arizona. Davina's grandmother is a respected Navajo
Look at those
elder.
ears. Holy
She's
fuck.
witnessed tremendous change over the course of her many years.
Must pick up Starlink signals with those things.
Amanda Blackhorse visits Davina's grandmother for the first time.
We're still feeling the effects of boarding schools today. Boarding schools actually still do exist to this day, and it has completely demolished the indigenous familial system, and many of our people are suffering, and they don't. The thing is, they don't realize that they are suffering from the boarding school syndrome. Many of us don't even understand it in that perspective.
Disrupting the family system for the Native Americans. Disrupt the family system from the African American culture. Disrupt the family system in every society in America. Huh.
Perspective.
In the 1960s, the civil rights era brought change. Native Americans were part of that movement.
And I remember reading Robert Kennedy, who was Attorney General at that time, saying that there should be day schools where students can be bused to their home. He says, if you take the child away from their environment, you kill the spirit. He says, how can you expect a child to learn when you kill the spirit?
That's why they killed
The
him.
Indian Civil Rights Act passed in 1968. The occupation of Alcatraz and Wounded Knee were significant political events which brought Native issues to public attention.
In the 1970s, the American public became aware of discontent, their rage at hundreds of years of American policies of genocide and ethnic cleansing.
It's not true for all Americans or Westerners that the intent of Native American policy was to obliterate all natives, take their land, and this and that. There was some very, caring,
it's a rough
and
translation.
compassionate people during that time that advocated for Native Americans.
Congress passed the Indian Self-Determination and Education Act in 1975, giving tribal communities greater control over their own affairs. The Santa Fe Indian School in New Mexico was started during the assimilation era. Pueblo governors acknowledged deficiencies in education. Committed educators proved to be catalysts for positive change.
I'm uniquely qualified to know what the kids are going through because I went through the same thing, being away from home, so I know what the kids are going through, but I also know that what the kids are as capable of doing.
The Santa Fe Indian School is owned and operated by the 19 Pueblos in New Mexico.
Not the government. That's good.
They have taken responsibility for educating their children.
Good. I
the
wish
Pueblo
we could.
Council named Joseph Abeta as the first superintendent.
Those people have failed our kids for over 200 years. If we fail once or twice, relative to how many times our kids have been failed, we deserve the rights. So we took it on.
I am from the Tlingit and Haida tribe in Alaska, and I'm affiliated with the Mescalero Apache tribe.
Alicia is a boarding school student at the Santa Fe Indian School.
When you go to the Santa Fe Indian School, you experience what it feels like to be genuinely cared about and to have the support from teachers and from staff and from your friends.
Self-determination means self-determination. A condition for self-determination is that we learn how to do for ourselves, accept responsibility. And when we do good, it's our success. When we do bad, it's our failure. And creating that kind of attitude, I think, really motivated a lot of kids to show people who we are, that we are capable.
It's definitely difficult to think about what boarding schools were compared to what they are today because it was so different. A lot of terrible things took place and a lot of terrible things were inflicted on Native Americans, and I think it changed from wanting to assimilate Native Americans into, white culture to now, which is, really nurturing who we are as a people and supporting who we are.
Alicia attends Carlos Santisteban's physics class.
Resonance to it. We're going to look at that a little bit more in terms of what's happening with the waves, but not that.
Alicia ends her day at the dorm, which is her home away from home.
You're my best friend today.
She catches the train to Albuquerque on most weekends to return to her family.
By herself?
I feel like whenever I was going to schools in Albuquerque, the public schools, I was able to click with people, but not on this particular level, because going to the Santa Fe Indian School and being Native American and being surrounded by Native American students, you build connections with them that you can't with people that don't understand and don't relate to who you are on a very spiritual and personal level. And I think
I believe it. Well, not
just
what
gives
she
you
said.
a lot of
I believe
room
what she
for,
said.
discovering who you are and figuring out like who you want to be.
That's our school. It belongs to us in a way that schools have never been our schools.
And then we're at this tipping point that I think could go either way. And it is essential that our young people understand their responsibility. And as a teacher, I remind them and I tell them, and I say, think about the future.
We're uniquely Native American. How do we take those Native American values and belief systems and how do we put them into this school, that Santa Fe Indian School, so that you come onto campus and we're an Indian school, we're an Indian boarding school, and that we're
name
okay
says
with
it.
We're good.
Darlene Smith teaches a class in Navajo history to grade schoolers. Navajo language, culture, and history are embraced here.
In the boarding school days, the government didn't want us to speak Navajo. So I think a lot of the parents from back then, the ones that went to boarding school, I think they're grandmothers now, a lot of them don't want their kids to learn Navajo.
Dacian Spotted Elk is Davina's son. Roy and Darlene Smith are his grandparents. He attends East High School in Salt Lake City. George Henry teaches a diversity class at the school.
I wonder why they picked him.
In my class this year, I think Mr. George Henry, who's a great teacher, he does a great job at teaching different cultures and explaining, how it is to be a person of color.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm kind of understanding.
I've been taught to, always take pride in it, and I think it's awesome. I'm Native American, and I hope other Native Americans realize that also. Growing up,
Wow, they put retards on the wall?
Would say racist things, and I could recall one day a kid told me to get your Native American butt out of here and go home. And I didn't want to be mean or say anything mean back. So
you hit him.
I told him, I gave him a brief history lesson about Native Americans, and I told him, I said, this is my home. And I told him how Native Americans, how we struggled and how we were pushed away from our homes. And he was shocked, and he didn't say another word about it ever again.
Dacian plays on the basketball team.
There are little signs like when I pat my heart, it's telling him, play with your heart. There are other times when I'm, pointing to my eyes, it's like focus. I know my son's has had some history with students that have name called him or his native friends. I know that for a fact.
I mean, I used to get name called.
And so
Like
he
I said,
uses sports as a way to cope. The imagery I see at basketball games is very offensive for me. I know my son he's had to encounter with that times when he's traveled. There's a high school not far from here that has the imagery, and I've seen when football games, when you've seen the painted faces on them, or in basketball games, either they're making the whoopee noise.
Some of the things I
whoopee
hear and
noise?
see, people doing the chant and call me racist names, and it hurts sometimes. And I can recall, one game where I let it get to me, and I didn't want to play or finish the game, and I couldn't believe someone would say something like that to me.
For the most part, in general, do not support using Native people and tribes, Indian tribes, as mascots or nicknames.
Oh no, there's some other
However,
Indian
in the
tribes
case
that are
of
okay with
the
it.
University of Utah and the use of the Ute nickname, I'm totally in support of it. The University of Utah did consult with the tribes back in the 70s, and
So did the
more
Redskins.
recently met formally with the tribe and obtained a resolution, which is our official form of business.
Amanda Blackhorse is possibly best known for participating in the lawsuit regarding the Washington Redskins name.
For generations, we're taught to believe that we're savages. We're taught to believe that we were less than, that we were redskins, that we were primitive.
Go after the Cowboys.
And we really
That was your real enemy, right?
That has been beaten into our heads. You have mascots. You have cowboys and Indians in Hollywood. The only representation out there of Native American people in the national media is our stereotypes. We're looked at only
That's
through
with
that lens.
any race.
And so I think sports mascots has a huge responsibility in that.
It's not okay. It's not. Although
You know
I know there are.
I really don't agree with any Huskies names because that's my favorite type of dog. Actually, I own 2 Huskies, and I find it very offensive that a member of my family is the name of your team. That's kind of fucked up. I don't agree with that at all. I'm filing a class action lawsuit.
Tribes that say, oh no, it's honoring us. But no, look at the statistics. Read the statistics. It really does impact our younger generation. It impacts them to where they...
The only scalps I want to see is them Nazi scalps.
Are ashamed.
Samuel Holiday rides in a Navajo tribal parade. He and Dana Key are Navajo code talkers who participated in World War II.
Yep.
Code talkers used native language to communicate vital information which enemies
Oh, now
could
the
not
government
decipher.
wants them. Okay, what we're gonna do, we're gonna take your kids. We're gonna make you forget everything you are. Forget your language. We're gonna train you. But at the same time, I hope you didn't forget your language because we need your language. So I don't know what to tell you.
People from several Native American tribes were code talkers in World War I and World War II. The same language that was discouraged during boarding school days.
Oh, okay. I
They
should have just
call
waited.
that brown soap. If you hear talking Navajo, they smash it right into your face like this. Brown soap was bitter.
They are regarded with a great deal of respect for using the Navajo language to create a code, which many people say then was very significant to ending the war.
The boarding schools contributed many former students to the military.
Mm.
Ira Hayes participated in the flag raising on Iwo Jima during World War II. He was a member of the Pima tribe and attended Phoenix Indian School.
So in the end, the government
Native
got what they wanted.
Americans, and including the Navajo people, are some of the most patriotic people, patriotic citizens of the United States. I believe that it is
Wait a
part-
second. So the United States tried to erase their entire civilization, but they're fucking patriotic. That is fucking amazing. You can hate your goddamn government, but you can still love your country. I wish other motherfuckers realize that. You can actually differentiate between the two.
part of the processes of American assimilation. And so it's very difficult to
flag needs to be
separate
replaced. That's
our
disgraceful.
sense of who we are as citizens of our respective and distinctive tribal
Oh,
nations
shit.
and being citizens of the United States.
Low self-esteem, poverty, drugs, and hopelessness are continuing problems for Native Americans.
That's why we have a lot of sort of quote unquote mental health problems today. You see high rates of depression and anxiety. And I believe that's where that comes from, because their trauma has been passed down, and we really are feeling what they're feeling at times.
Some of them, they accomplished what they needed to do, but some of them, they became an alcoholic. One of the very, very close friends, when I got married and when I had the family, we were driving downtown Flagstaff. There was this man carrying a gunny sack, carrying aluminum cans. And it turned out that that was one of my very, very best friends. And he was out there, he was homeless.
Damn.
He was begging for money.
The boarding school era wasn't simply a time of adversity. Accomplishments also accompanied it. Carlisle's Jim Thorpe received Olympic and professional international fame. He is widely known as one of the world's greatest athletes.
For someone like Jim Thorpe to come out of that and to be acknowledged for his feats as an athlete, I think was a point or a place where people could feel some sense of pride that one of their own had indeed accomplished something great against such adversity.
Hopi distance runner Louis Tiwanima excelled at Carlisle. He won the Olympic silver medal in 1912. Louis eventually returned to the Hopi Mesas. Acclaimed sculptor, painter, and illustrator Alan Hauser was a product of the Santa Fe Indian School.
Oh, shit.
He later taught at the Intermountain Indian School. Lakota Sioux distance runner Billy Mills was raised on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. He attended the Haskell Institute and the University of Kansas.
I was thinking maybe LeBron James would give him a run for his money, but if you bumped into him, then it's over.
Billy Mills won the 1964 Olympic gold medal in the 10,000-meter event. He served in Vietnam with the Marine Corps.
We're very bright. We're very intelligent. I know that because I see that everywhere I've traveled. I know we have bright children, but the thing is it doesn't pertain to the white American society, but the test that we are given doesn't pertain to who we are. I mean, Columbus didn't discover America.
Fuck yeah. Put Big Sam in the cage.
Some apologies have been made for the policies of assimilation, but many Native people seek more.
First and foremost is an apology.
Which hasn't
The
come.
President of the United States has already issued that, but I think most states need to also do that.
I've often acknowledged the painful history, the broken promises that are part of our past. And I've said that while we couldn't change the past, working together, nation to nation, we could build a better future.
He wasn't referring to Native Americans.
Some refused to retaliate when the opportunity came.
And I told myself that one of these days I'm gonna go get her back. But I did see her, and she's an old lady now, and I thought, no, I can't do that. But at the time, I was angry. It's like no one just goes and slaps you for no reason. I was doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
This is a great country, and we need to remember that. But it requires maintenance to keep it
That's
great.
not what
Because I'm a big
the government tells me.
Thomas Jefferson fan when he said that our democracy hinges upon the quality of the education of the public. And we're starting to see that today.
The past is marked by the graves of children, the cemeteries far away from their homes and families. They are remembered only in the hearts and minds of a few.
When we remember
I've fucked up as this sounds. Are those gravestones empty?
stories of their experiences, we remember the children who died there, who never returned home. Many of them not only died from sicknesses and diseases, but they also died from loneliness and heartbreak. Their stories remind us that we should always do better and that we should cherish and love our children, and that they are the next generation.
And that's another idea of what our government really thinks of us, how stupid they think we are, that they can hide this shit right out here in the open, and no one's going to pay attention to it. Which is why I'm going to give a sneak peek on why that this whole lesson or refresher is important. So give me your eyes, your ears, and your minds. Just listen for a minute.
If you're a parent in the state of California, then you should know about some really bad bills that may be passed into law. My name is Denise. I'm co-founder of Freedom Angels. We're a human and civil rights organization here in California. We are grassroots lobbyists and political strategists. Let's talk about some really bad bills that are like this close to being passed. You can pause to read, but we have AB 665. This bill will allow 12-year-olds to decide to leave their home and to go into a residential shelter under the care of the state.
I'm sorry, a what? A residential shelter under the care of the state. They're giving kids the option to leave once they hit 12 and go to these residential shelters.
AB 957 changes family code that will force a judge to remove custody from the parent who does not affirm their child's gender identity during a custody battle. And AB 1078 would remove local control of school boards for books, curriculum, and policies. Now, unfortunately, my partner Tara Thornton and I were really late getting on this bills because we were busy defeating AB 659. That was the HPV mandate for all children in public and private school in California, including college. We were able to defeat that. So just know there is no HPV mandate in the state of California. However, these bills are very close to passing. We're at the end of legislative session. We have just a few weeks left. And so we can't just sit by and let these bills pass in our silence. So here's the information for tomorrow. We'll be there at the California Capitol at, we're meeting at 10 a.m.
What? Now you see why when I was reading all this, someone sent me that video and it clicked in my head. They're actually making it to where your kids can be like, I want to go to one of these residential shelters run by the state. And that's okay. Because, there's a history of what these residential shelters run by the state look like. And unfortunately, it's not going to be religious, run by religion. They're going to be run by social justice warriors, and people think it's okay for kids to be sexualized and decide, oh, I want to be a girl, so you can call me Avi. And makes sense, right? And this will be my voice. This is my girl voice. It's okay. They're doing it again. They just found a way to get around it by taking away parents' rights. Breaking up the families again. Breaking up the families again. But anyway. Let me know what y'all think. Because I'm not telling y'all how to think. Because you'd be crazy like me. Just telling you to think. Y'all saw past 2 days something that, might have reopened your eyes or gave you a look into something that we obviously are told to forget. We're taught to forget. But we shouldn't forget. We need to spread this message, so to speak, that they're fucking doing this over again. And that only leads to more and more bullshit. Oh, why did that unfocus, you fucking Fed-run cameras? Anyway. Y'all? Hell yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway. Y'all have a good day. Good night. If you watch college football, you're about 2 hours late. But, pancakes. You know what? Bacon pancakes. Making bacon pancakes.